All right, let's talk about a band that didn't just follow the rules of rock and roll. They grabbed them, smashed them to bits, and built something entirely new from the wreckage. Today, we are diving deep into the chaotic, brilliant world of The Who. And that's really the heart of it, isn't it? You have to understand, The Who weren't just another band with some catchy songs. No way. They were inventors, they were visionaries. Honestly, they were architects who completely re-engineered the sound, the style, and the very soul of rock music for everyone who came after. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of how they did it, let's just pause for a second and appreciate the sheer scale of what they left behind. I mean, we're talking about things that are so deeply baked into the DNA of music today that we just assume they've always been there. But nope, someone had to dream them up first. And look at this list. This is so much more than just a bunch of bullet points. Every single one of these was a game changer. The rock opera, that turned a simple album into an epic story. The Marshall stack and using feedback as a weapon, that turned pure volume into an actual instrument. And that raw, in-your-face energy, well, that laid the groundwork for the entire punk movement. This is the house they built. Now, to really get how they pulled all this off, you have to go back to the very beginning, because their sound didn't just appear out of nowhere. Oh no, it was forged in the fires of post-war working-class London, a place that was just gray and buttoned up enough, and totally begging for a rebellion. So you've got Pete Townshend, John Entwistle, and Roger Daltrey. They all grew up in the same area, even went to the same school, but they were on different tracks. Daltrey was a sheet metal worker who got kicked out of school. Townshend and Entwistle, they were the more studious grammar school kids. But what brought them together was this new electric energy that was absolutely sweeping across Brit. And things moved fast. They started out as a pretty standard covers band called The Detours. But the real turning point, the moment everything changed, was right here in 1963. Roger Daltrey decides to put down his guitar and just be the frontman. And that simple move forced Pete Townshend to become the one and only guitarist. Suddenly, you have that signature power trio plus singer format, which just paved the way for the human explosion known as Keith Moon to join a year later. Okay, you absolutely cannot talk about the early Who without talking about the mods. Their first manager, a guy named Peter Meaden, basically saw them as the perfect poster boys for this whole new scene. It was all about razor-sharp suits, Italian scooters, and a total obsession with American R&B. It was a way to be stylish and defiant when your surroundings were anything but. And here's the thing, the Who didn't just participate in the mod scene. They became its living, breathing embodiment. They wore the Target logos, the Union Jackets. They played that maximum R&B that powered those speed-fueled all-nighters. But most importantly, their music just perfectly captured that feeling of being young, angry, and misunderstood. They weren't just in the scene, they were the scene. So once they had their identity locked down in the mod scene, the Who were ready for their next big innovation. And this is the one that would make them famous and infamous all over the world. The art of turning pure, unadulterated chaos into a masterpiece. You gotta love this story. It wasn't planned. It wasn't some marketing gimmick. Townshend's on this tiny stage with a super low ceiling. He accidentally snaps the neck of his favorite Rickenbacker guitar, and the crowd laughs at him. So, in this moment of pure frustration and defiance, he just decides, oh yeah, watch this, and proceeds to smash the entire thing to splinters. And right here, this is the alchemy. See, any other musician would have just been ticked off. But Townshend, with his art school background, immediately saw the power in what just happened. He connected that burst of anger to this thing called the auto-destructive art movement and reframed the whole event. Suddenly, it wasn't just a tantrum, it was a statement. Destruction wasn't an end, it was a form of creation. And their commitment to just sheer sonic force was, well, absolute. For 10 years, they held the Guinness World Record for the loudest concert ever, clocking in at a bone-shattering 126 decibels. That's not just loud, you guys. That is a physical assault. It was a key part of the chaos. And from there, the destruction just got bigger and bigger. That first accidental smash became a nightly ritual. Then at Monterey Pop, they introduced themselves to America by completely demolishing their entire set. And then there was the Smothers Brothers show. Keith Moon, being Keith Moon, packed his drum kit with way too many explosives. He detonated it, literally knocked the show off the air, and gave Pete Townshend permanent hearing damage. This was chaos as a global brand. But the Who were so much more than just noise and violence. Townshend started to get bored with the whole 3-minute pop single formula, and that dissatisfaction, that ambition for something more, led to their next giant leap forward, the rock opera. See, this wasn't just about writing longer songs. It was a deeply intellectual and spiritual quest for him. He was really influenced by his spiritual guide, Meher Baba, and he wanted to tell a big, complex story about suffering, isolation, and ultimately enlightenment, all through the language of rock and roll. He wanted to make an album you had to listen to from start to finish. And the story of Tommy is this epic hero's journey, right? It's about this kid who, after a deep trauma, becomes deaf, dumb, and blind. He finds this kind of spiritual awakening by becoming a pinball wizard, and then he becomes this messiah figure, only to be rejected by his own followers. It's a full, complete story arc, something absolutely unheard of for a rock album back then. And the symbolism in here is just incredible. The pinball machine isn't just a game, it's his path to godhood. The mirror he shatters isn't just glass, it's his false self. This wasn't just a concept album, it was a seriously complex piece of art. And you know what? It worked. Commercially, Tommy was a lifeline. It pulled the band out of massive debt and turned them into absolute global superstars. So now that they've proven they can be high-concept artists, let's zoom back out and look at the actual nuts and bolts, the technical stuff they did that left a permanent mark on pretty much all of rock music. I mean, it doesn't get more basic or more important than this, the power chord. Now, Townshend didn't technically invent it, but he's the one who made it the cornerstone of rock guitar. That simple, aggressive two-note chord is the literal foundation for hard rock, for heavy metal, for punk rock. Seriously, almost any heavy song you've ever heard is built with the sonic DNA he popularized. And their technical genius was everywhere. They were the first to start stacking Marshall amps on top of each other, creating that iconic wall of sound that defines arena rock. John Entwistle completely refused to let the bass just be a background instrument, playing it with the speed and fury of a lead guitar. And they were pioneers with synthesizers, using them not as a weird effect but as the rhythmic engine of the song. Think about that pulsing sequence in Baba O'Reilly. That became a blueprint for decades of electronic rock to come. And hey, don't just take my word for it. Listen to a legend like Geddy Lee from Rush. He called John Entwistle one of the first gods of bass. Entwistle's loud, trebly, and ridiculously fast style completely changed the job description for a rock bass player. And finally, we have to talk about punk. There is a straight, unbroken line from the snarling attitude of my generation to the punk explosion 10 years later. The leaders of that movement, Johnny Rotten, Joey Ramone, you name it, they all pointed right back to The Who as the original source. They were, without a doubt, the godfathers of punk. So that's the story. The Who were true alchemists. They turned accidents into art, they turned noise into anthems, and they turned pure teenage rebellion into a philosophy. Which kind of leaves us with one last question to chew on. In our modern world of digital perfection and perfectly polished music, have we maybe lost some of that creative fire that you can only find in a little bit of beautiful, unpredictable chaos?